Located on 225 acres in Garden City, Long Island, Nassau Community College, a member of the State University of New York system, has close to 20,000 students attend the school each year. The college mascot is Leo the Lion, and these are his stories of the school's absolute best and brightest who have graduated over the past 50 plus years. So let's catch up together as the Alumni Association of Nassau Community College proudly presents Lion Tales on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Welcome to Lion Tales. My name is Dr. Lynnda Nadien, and I am a director on the board of the Alumni Association at Nassau Community College and a proud graduate. I am here to celebrate the successes of our alum, and together we will share stories that will inspire, uplift, and often amuse you. Each week, I will introduce you to alumni of Nassau Community College interested in sharing their experiences while attending the college and the secrets to their success. Today's guest is Brian Buckley, class of 2000. Upon high school graduation, he attended Catholic University of America studying politics, only to realize this was not his passion and returned to attend Nassau Community College and was accepted to the honors program. Brian worked at Nassau Community College in the honors office and has some fond memories. Brian is currently a high school English teacher in the Plainedge School District, where he also serves as vice president of the Plainedge Teachers Union, the PFT, Plainedge Federation of Teachers, and he serves as the English Department Coordinator. He is a graduate of Hofstra University with a dual major of elementary education and English with a concentration in creative writing. He worked for the New York City Department of Education, and this led him to the Plainedge schools. He is married to Nikki, and together they have a 3-year-old daughter, Alexandria Ryan. Welcome to Lion Tales, Brian Buckley, class of 2000.
Wow, that sounds very impressive when I hear it all in one shot.
It really does. So tell us about your decision to attend Nassau Community College and what was going on in 2000.
Yeah, so going through the whole college admissions process, I really had one school in mind, and I wound up at my target school. It didn't take me long, though, to realize that my major was probably not really suited for me. It's not political science. Everyone says, oh, you're studying political science in D.C. That must have been great. No, it was politics. And politics down there is pretty much pre-law. So I was in way over my head. Tiny little school, great school, but I realized it was not for me. So I came home, took advice from my parents. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I came here. I was lucky enough. Carol Farber was the director of the Honors College at the time. And she, I guess, saw my application, and she called me. Believe it or not, I was registered for an English class at like 5-something in the morning. I remember that. Like, I had to do the registration very late. And anyway, she took care of that. She was awesome. And I wound up working in that office for the entire duration that I was here. I worked very closely with her secretary, Ro. She was a really sweet woman. And ultimately, I took, you name it, I took sailing, I took some art classes, some ceramics. I had a really good time, and I just had a chance, I guess, to explore things that I would not have otherwise. So I really appreciate everything that Nassau gave me, to be honest.
Yeah. And what were some of the favorite courses? I like the fact that, you know, they do offer, it is liberal arts, but
Yes.
it's something that I think people can handle because they say, oh, I'll have an art class, but then I can also go into a bio class and not be as stressed out because I'm coming out of my art class. So what were some things that were on that course list for you?
I mean, I remember taking such random courses at times. I took a bunch of philosophy courses because I was still very much interested in the political realm. I do remember, you know, the phys ed aspect where we had to take a couple of phys ed classes, and I do remember taking sailing.
Yeah.
And ironically enough, we sailed out of Oyster Bay, which is where I live now. So we had to take, it was a couple hours of a course like in a classroom. And then we were up in Oyster Bay sailing little boats. And I was with my girlfriend at the time and a friend, one of my close friends who I'm still very close friends with to this day. I remember taking ceramics one summer during the summer session and just spending, you know, time, like hours in there during whatever they would call them, lab hours or open hours, just messing around and, you know, trying to figure out how to have my clay creation not blow up in a kiln, but usually because I didn't use the proper method, it would some of those didn't make it out.
It's like Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
I remember carrying the clay from the parking lot, and it weighed like 15 or 20 pounds, and I had no wherewithal about, how am I going to get the clay there? I just picked it up and carried it all the way to the art studio, which is past the bookstore here, which is pretty far. It's like a 2-mile walk.
I don't know. At the time, I think the whole art complex was relatively new. I don't know if it was attached to the G building or if it was somewhere around there, or maybe, I don't know. But I remember the studio was just a really cool, big open place, and our teacher was really cool. I love that. So I just like taking classes that honestly I would not have taken in high school. Art being one of them.
Right.
I had really good memories when I think back to all my time here, to be honest.
And then so some of your most memorable professors, even if we can't remember their names, because a lot of times we forget the name, but we were sort of inspired by that course.
There was one professor, and I think I met him through philosophy and then gerontology, I believe. And he wanted me to kind of get into the field. I stayed in touch with him for a little bit after I graduated. But yeah, I definitely, his name is escaping me. Did
you have Professor Hiddleman?
That doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah.
But, my time also here is kind of blended with my time at Hofstra.
Yeah.
I remember taking very different courses here, obviously, because when I got to Hofstra, it was mainly elementary ed and a little bit of English here and there. No, I don't remember that name.
Yeah, I remember. Well, I also transferred and ended up at Hofstra as well. And, was a little bit surprised upon acceptance there, because that was sort of the elite, the 4-year school, moving over there. And then I ended up getting a master's there and a professional diploma, and then all of a sudden I'm teaching there, and you just never thought that this, carrying all the clay to the art room was going to lead you down this road. It is really interesting how did you feel that it sort of molded and inspired you to move to that next level?
I think, definitely being, growing up on Long Island and living in Wantagh, I grew up maybe, 15 or 20 minutes from here, always going to the Coliseum as a kid, always driving by Hofstra and Nassau Community when I visited my grandparents who used to live in Garden City. I never really would have thought I would have spent my collegiate years here. But I think that everything obviously happens for a reason, and I looking back on it, it was really the best route possible.
Yeah.
I like the experience of going away, but I think like most teenagers, you think you know everything, and it was one of those situations where I put all of my eggs in one basket, and I kind of dropped the basket because it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I have a very similar route at Hofstra. I wound up going there, got my bachelor's degree, and then took some time off. I taught in the city, wound up at Plainedge, and I had to go back for my master's, went back to Hofstra for my master's. The one regret I do have is not continuing on to get my doctorate. Yeah. I just needed a break, and I always knew I wanted to go back in the classroom because I love being a student, and then I started coaching, and that was my life for a while. So that's probably the one regret. But I wound up working at Hofstra as well in the literacy program over there at the name's escaping me. But it was nice to actually get money from them for a little bit instead of giving them money.
At the clinic at Saltzman Clinic?
At Saltzman Center, there you go.
Yes. I was also at Saltzman Clinic.
I worked there for a little bit right after I got I think it was either during when I was getting my graduate degree or after I got my master's. But Hofstra, and the best part was everything was transferable. They took all of my credits from Nassau.
Right.
But looking back on it, the professors I think I had here oftentimes were more engaged and even at a higher level in their fields than some of the professors I had at Hofstra. And I remember having some conversations with even professors here, and they loved it, and you could feel that. And it was kind of, you get that family feeling here, which I would imagine you don't have in most community schools, but I think it's really a central and an integral part of Nassau County to have a great community college.
Yeah, and encouraging, there are some students that really may not be ready to go away, and there's a lot of fear in going away. And I think the generation coming up right now, and you will know that better than I would, working with adolescent students, the pressure on them to get into that school that they love and then to go. And I know so many parents pack up, drive them up, and the kid's like, no, I can't stay here. And then they come back home.
Yeah. Definitely, and now that I've been in high school in Plainedge for about 5 or 6 years now, and, I always ask students, obviously, like, so what are your plans? What are your plans? What are your plans? And some of them, they, because they watch their friends, they're all going away. And then you'll always have a couple, they're like, no, I'm going to Nassau. I'm like, I went to Nassau. I graduated from Nassau. That's the best thing to do. Figure out what you want to do. Most of the credits, if not all the credits, will transfer, and then you'll get that 4-year degree from whatever school you wind up at.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's a definite option. I just think that there is a little bit of that, you're not going away. There's a little bit of a stigma attached to it, but it was. My dad always said, it's the cheapest way to a 4-year degree. And I only listened to my parents a couple times in my lifetime, but
and usually, like now, what I know, the one thing I know is that everything they ever said was right. My father would. I remember I went to Hunter College for one semester after Nassau, and I was accepted there. And I went in. He took me in. We had to do an entrance exam. And I remember when I came out, he looked at me and he said, "Are you sure you want to do this every day?" Because it was a big commute.
Yeah.
You're on the Long Island Railroad to the 1 to the 42nd Street all the way to the 6, and you're all the way up there. And he was right. So I lasted the one semester, came back here, ended up finishing here. But I always knew that Nassau set me up to, at least I had the sort of the feeling that, well, let me just try to go to school in the city and see what it's like. And I give credit to anyone who does the commute, because it's a killer commute.
Yeah, I give credit to your dad for giving you the freedom to kind of figure that out on your own.
Yeah.
And I hear you on the commute, because, I'm just listening to all the different transfers you had to make just to get there.
Yeah.
And then you have a day at school, and then you got to do the whole thing just to get home.
And I had just met my husband at that time, and so there were no cell phones. So I had a bag of coins so that I could use the payphone to call him. Yep. And so, thinking about that, I mean, now obviously it's probably a little bit easier because everything's on your phone and you get your ticket. But I think that Nassau was served us well in terms of guiding us there.
Absolutely.
So now, as an English teacher,
yes,
describe, how have you coordinated sort of a modernized program for, these young people that are probably some of them are pretty talented writers, and they write a lot, and people are journaling now. So what's going on at the high school as far as that's concerned?
I think as far as writing goes, I think my biggest challenge, or something I like to focus on, would be the difference between formal writing and informal writing. And a lot of times what we do in the classroom is setting them up for formal writing, but we don't really foster those kids that just like to write. So the good thing about Plainedge, and the great thing about Plainedge, I shouldn't say good, is that we have a lot of different elective courses. We do have creative writing. I haven't had a chance to teach creative writing, but I would love to. And the enrollment, fluctuates from year to year. But as far as keeping everything kind of modern, I mean, we've done everything from, back when Facebook was more popular than it is now, I guess. We used to do like, a Facebook page for the different characters in Shakespeare, or Romeo and Juliet. Or, nowadays everything kind of can be as digital as you want. But believe it or not, a lot of these kids, especially during COVID, they were craving just the old pen and paper. Right. And having that connection to a book instead of, staring at a Chromebook. So I think it's kind of a balance. It's exposing them to all of the new technology, but also there are times where you can't really replace the good old, pen and paper. So in the past couple of years, though, to get back to the writing, I teach a couple AP language and composition courses, and that is writing intense. So the beauty of that is I have to prepare them for the AP exam that they're taking in May, and an aspect of that is keeping them current. They have to kind of know what's going on in the world outside of Massapequa. So we have a lot of time to, I kind of say, we read, we write, we discuss, not necessarily in that order. Usually we read, we discuss, then we write. And the writing gives them time to sit and reflect. How do you feel about these topics? Have them read about politics. I mean, we're definitely not we're not at a deficit of finding topics in this world, because everything, I feel like every day there's something else going on.
Yeah, every day there's something that you could either connect to before Christ, or it happened 50 years ago, and you're like, oh my God, it's happening again. Yeah, it is amazing. I think, and reading and writing, from a reading specialist point of view, all of that is connected where usually good readers become good writers. The more you read, the more experiences, the more prior knowledge you have that you can bring to the table, which is really exciting. And I do encourage, even all my adult students in the college arena to, if you're not sure, look it up. It's at your fingertips now.
And I think that's the beauty of the world today, but it's also it could be a detriment. With the whole, we have the new AI stuff going on now, and you can throw a prompt up and a computer can just spit out a paper. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that technology is moving at a much faster pace than I think anyone has realized. And the ramifications on education and on writing in general is going to be interesting to kind of sit back and watch, especially in the chair or the seat that I'm in. How is it going to impact high school kids and beyond? Because I think it's going to be a real problem that I think a lot of us did not really anticipate having to face so soon. But I think the technology's there already, and it's only going to get better. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It will be. I mean, I think it's so important, too, that I know for a fact, because my son is a Plainedge graduate, that the students that came out of his particular class when he graduated, they were very good writers. When they did go into the 4-year schools or wherever they went to college, they had to do a lot of writing, and they were well prepared. Good. And my son said, wow, thank God I did that. Yep. Thank God they showed me that. The AP class really was worthwhile because now I'm able to do it, where coming from the rest of the nation, some of those kids really struggled with it. And if they were an English language learner, it was even more difficult because they weren't exposed to the literature. They weren't exposed to different styles of writing. So they had a lot of difficulty doing that. So now when you have 5 sections of English per day, what does your day look like?
Correct.
In high school?
I go from one extreme to the other, to be honest. I start off my morning with AP Language and Comp. So those are, highly motivated juniors. This year I have really small classes, which is great. And then I have 3 English 10 classes. So that's just regular Regents track. And of those 3 classes, I teach 2 inclusion classes. So I go from the high achievers or to kids that really need the help and structure and support. And I've been working with the same co-teacher since I've been in the high school for 5 or 6 years. So it's kind of interesting where I go from one extreme to the other. And I love both worlds, to be honest. I wouldn't want to change anything. So I try to really, it forces me to meet every single student at his or her level. And I think that's the most important thing, is to let them know, like, look, I can show you the structure, but ultimately you're going to have to play around with it and you're going to have to find your own voice. And it's fun to kind of sit back and watch teenagers find their voice when they're writing, because some of them don't realize that they even have one.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
You are listening to Lion Tales on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I am your host, Dr. Lynnda Nadien, and our guest today is Brian Buckley, class of 2000. So what are some of the, you were talking about some of the challenges of being an English teacher and some of the things that we're up against now. Why do you think teachers are always under a lot of pressure? And at this point, post-pandemic, how can we relieve, some of that pressure for the betterment of student achievement? I mean, what would be something that would make sense?
That is a very good question. Yeah. I think, given everything that has happened in the past couple of years, we always keep saying we need to get back to normal. We need to get back to normal. But I've yet to kind of see that fully. I think we're still seeing the ramifications of, a year and a half or 2 years of whatever we wanted to call what school was during COVID. I think, honestly, especially at the high school level, I think it's time that all of those safety nets and those safeguards that we put in place, I think we kind of just need to push forward and realize that, okay, things are back to quote unquote normal. For example, I mean, we're taking, kids are taking Regents exams, and I know we know that word if you went to high school in New York State. They're taking Regents exams tomorrow, actually, in English. All 11th graders will take the English Regents. And over the, last year, they created this, they didn't want to harm the kids' average.
Right, hold harmless.
What they call
I think they called it hold harmless. So you could take it.
You could take it, but if you didn't do well, it didn't count.
Right.
And when the kids knew that before they took it, imagine that, high school kids, teenagers, they're not going to really take it as seriously as they would have. And I think we saw that a little bit with the results. And, even if you can tie that into this whole, SAT, ACT, or, a standardized test optional for college admissions.
Yeah.
It's a lot of things are becoming optional, whereas in the real world or in life, how many options do you really have, So I don't know. I think it's that delicate balance of helping those younger kids out that certainly have those learning gaps and basic skills of math and reading. But at the high school level, I'm noticing, a maturity dip in a lot of these kids because they spent a year or, almost a year and a half or 2 years not socializing with their peers.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It was, and I have to also, this time last year, we were still in masks.
Right.
We still had sneeze guards up, and I kind of forget about that from time to time. But I hope that, in a couple of years, we won't hear these same terms or these same phrases, and everything is finally
because
back to normal.
we really were. It's funny how, let's say, I think next month is about 40 months since like the legit March 2020 to now, because I kept keeping notes in the calendar and writing things down. But I know that we came back in September, but we so quickly forgot what had occurred.
Yep.
And we were out of the masks. We didn't have the plexiglass, which cost the district so much money.
Yep.
All over the state of New York. We were kind of convinced to get it, but it really didn't matter as much.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the teachers, the teachers never really wavered. They I know my husband is a music teacher. He was down in the basement. I could hear him doing all of his lessons. I'm upstairs and I'm doing all my lessons. My son is in his room. He's doing all his lessons. It was unbelievable that we kind of like twisted it in and did it. How did we do it?
We kind of had to pivot overnight, to be honest. I remember being in school the last day we were in school on that Friday, and we were one of the I don't want to say one of the last, but I remember other districts that were kind of closing. And I remember one of my kids, we were leaving an SAT prep class, believe it or not, and one of my kids is like, what do you think's going to happen? I'm like, nothing. We'll be here. Don't worry about it. No big deal. And then,
we never,
gone. It was like, wow, I did not expect that.
Yeah. We did not expect it.
It was very unexpected, but, working with the professionals and the administrators that I work with, it was refreshing to just see everybody do the best they could given the circumstances. And I think everyone just rose to the occasion. Students as well. I think everyone just had to kind of figure out this, new way of learning. Luckily, and I do think luckily, it was one of the advantages of being an English teacher, because I think certain subjects translate a little bit better to posting and to virtual learning and watching videos. Like if I was a math or a science teacher or, any type of content and not a skills teacher, I can't imagine what they went through.
Yeah, everything had to be sort of integrated. Watching 56 kindergartners on a Zoom call to talk about, straight lines and numbers.
And
it was really
5 or 6 year old sitting in a chair.
Yeah. And they almost there is a resiliency, but there's also in their head they kind of knew that something was weird, but they had to kind of figure it out, and they did, which I think is really incredible.
Yeah.
And now in the perspective of teacher retention and then that overall respect for the profession, because you as a union leader, vice president of the PFT, it is part of the job to hire excellent people and then retain them and hope that they have the respect for the union and also respect for the profession in itself. So what are you looking for in candidates when you
I think one of the benefits of being on Long Island, or even definitely being on Long Island, is we are never at a shortage for potential candidates that want to be a part of Plainedge. So what do we look for? We look for, honestly, sometimes experience. We look for flexibility, problem solving on the dime. And I think, I think just kind of overall professionalism and collegiality. I need to work with someone that I know I can trust and I know that I can rely on, and someone that's ready to just jump in and not, be reserved because they're the new guy or the new girl on the block. It's interesting being on the other side of interviews now for a while. I love interviewing. I really do. I love to talk because all we're doing is talking about what you do on a daily basis. Yeah. I really do enjoy kind of, just seeing, tell me about a lesson that you thought went really, really badly, or tell me about, what'd you do the next time. So I think we're always looking just for people with open minds, people that are used to problem solving with others, and, people that love kids, because that's the bottom line. You were in education for a long time. Everything doesn't matter as long as you put the kids' priority first.
Right. And one of the things, studying the adolescent brain and then early childhood development and seeing what that fosters. I mean, I do believe pre-K is beautiful and it's adorable. Some kids are not ready.
Correct.
They're really not. And I think that we're forcing them into a very structured environment. So I always want a candidate that understands the human development and the brain, because, Bobby might be ready for it, but Sally's not ready yet, and they may act out. The data shows in New York State that most of the infractions are from 5 and 6-year-olds, violent infractions, which, we see with what happened in Virginia. Yeah. And I think that's something to think about. Then we move going into middle school, high school, and those kids too. Adolescence is a specific brain function.
Yeah.
And so,
I spent many years in middle school. Middle school is an interesting place for sure, because it's, there's so much going on in their lives in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade that, I would always say school usually isn't even on that priority list.
Yeah.
And, you're a friend, you're a counselor, you're an older brother, you're a father figure. You're trying to be so many things because their world is not what you want, their world to necessarily be. And school is kind of an afterthought for a lot of them at that age. And it's kind of fun watching them grow. And then when you see them a couple years later, and now that I have had a chance to watch some of them grow in the high school, you see that maturity. You see that whole process. And it's really a very rewarding thing. I think that's also why, a lot of us are in the field of education, is to watch these kids succeed in front of our very eyes. I mean, how many people can say they do that on a daily basis?
Right. And then, with some of the key factors that you consider when you're planning your lessons, like what are some of the novels that inspire the students to read and write that they really love when you do a novel study?
We're in the midst of wrapping up Lord of the Flies right now in my 10th grade class.
Oh, I love that, yeah.
And they do, I had a kid, because I had to take a break and I had to plan it out. I didn't want to start the last chapter and then we have a week off for midterms.
Yeah.
So I had a kid before he left. He's like, wow, I really don't know how this ends. I'm like, you haven't read it before? He's like, no. I'm like, well, look, you can go home and read it. Or you can wait the week. So it'll be interesting to see next week if he actually picked up the last chapter.
He might watch the movie.
And read it. I had one kid told me that. He's told me he spent $15 for the movie. I'm like, hammer. It's on YouTube for free. I don't know why you did that. And we still haven't finished the book.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's funny because that was one of the ones that I read in high school. And I went to a high school where a lot of the books were banned. And in order to take them out of the library, you had to have mom sign. But of course, when you say you're going to ban a book, it piques your interest.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, oh my God, I have to get these books. Yeah. So with the notion of, changes in curriculum, what are some of the key factors that we want to consider now? Because you may say, I have 10 amazing novels. Are they going to offend someone? Is there something in it that is derogatory or destructive?
The beauty of literature is, a lot of things are open for interpretation. But I always go back to the classics. Classics are a classic for a reason.
Yeah.
There's a reason why these novels have endured the test of time. And I think, look, we could scour anything and find something offensive, but shouldn't that spark conversation? And shouldn't that spark conversation in an appropriate setting with a professional leading that conversation?
Yeah. I would like to thank our guest, Brian Buckley, and we would like to thank you for being here today.
You are very welcome.
And my name is Dr. Lynnda Nadien. I serve as a director on the board of the Nassau Community College Alumni Association, and I am a proud alum. Lion Tales is also available as a podcast on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. Thanks for listening to Lion Tales here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.